lights on the airways hum. Hear the tales of where they're from. Stories whispered, not in lies. Jobs they held through changing times.
Welcome back to Amplify Your Signal, where we share the real stories of job seekers beyond the resume. In each episode, we explore the human side of career transitions, the challenges, the lessons, and the insights that don't fit into a LinkedIn headline. Today, I'm excited to sit down with Natalie, whose career journey has taken some fascinating turns recently, and who's been embracing a season that she calls creative recovery. Natalie, I'm so glad you're here. To start us off, can you share a little bit about your career journey and what led you to where you are today?
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation. I was reflecting back on my career journey in preparation for our chat, and I realized I've actually had a really interesting, if somewhat meandering journey that's taken me to a lot of places. I've been pretty lucky. My career has spanned multiple countries. I started out in South Africa, where I'm from, working in Johannesburg, and then did a bit of time in the West Coast in LA, Seattle, and then finally here in Cincinnati. And I think my journey has been very much one of working for lifestyle brands, different consumer brands. I like to look at them as companies that have brought joy and purpose to people's lives. So things like flowers, chocolate, furniture, kitchen. But I've also been lucky from the business side as well. I've been able to work not only for myself. I had a clothing company when I lived and worked in LA for a few years, but for almost every type of structured company and business type out there. So I've worked in highly matrixed organizations. I've worked in big privately held, small privately held startups, private equity. So I think that has given me a really good foundation as a strategist and a marketer, because I understand how business works.
Mhm.
I understand brand and lifestyle very well, storytelling very well. And so when I look back at the culmination, I think it's made me just very, very well rounded in how I approach things. And so while it wasn't a meandering journey, it was a lot of fun. I got to work for a lot of amazing brands. And it's been a pleasure and a joy. And I've been very lucky.
I love that for you. So, one thing is that you've described this season of your life as one of creative recovery. So, what does that mean to you personally?
So I think, like a lot of people who are in transition right now, when you find yourself at the point of what's next, part of you is still in that space of I wake up in the morning and I'm used to having a lot of structure and I have my goals that I'm trying to achieve, and to some degree the things I need to do every day to push the ball forward, make an impact. And when you're in this moment of decompress and figure out what's next, you immediately lose some of that structure. I think there's a temptation and it's valid, you need to find that next job. So you
Mhm.
jump in, you build a new structure and you set the new goals, and it's finding the next job and you schedule your day. But for me, I was lucky in that I had the luxury of having a few weeks where I could just decompress and step back. And that really allowed me to kind of reconnect with myself and start to frame my journey in a way that was based in what makes me happy? What do I want? What brings me joy and what brings me purpose? But also, really importantly, I found some time to start doing things that I haven't done in a long time: painting, making jewelry, started to teach Pilates classes. And that really nourished my soul and helped me reconnect with myself and with my community and others in a kind of more purposeful, meaningful way. And it gave me, so there's this interesting thing. There's a coach, Pat Romboletti, who talks about confidence versus competence. And she says,
Mm.
when you're in a period of transition, you lose confidence because you've lost a job, and suddenly, all the things you did were so great, you start to question, like, am I that good? But what she reminds us is that you don't lose competence. You don't lose those skills and being good at something. And so being able to separate competence from confidence. And what I found in my creative recovery is that doing these other things allowed me to keep that through line of competence. I'm still good. I still do these things. And it has helped me work on maintaining that confidence, which is so important in a search and in career transition.
I love that because you're so right. I mean, you can go through, right? Like, was it me? That is so smart to lean into something where you can demonstrate that competence and remind yourself that you are good at things. Yeah, I love that.
And I will say too, teaching Pilates has been so enriching because
Mm,
I have seen the people in my class develop and flourish and get stronger, and I've developed connections and relationships with them. And so it has really helped feed not just my confidence, but also just feed this feeling of I'm having an impact and I'm helping others and still having an impact on people's lives in a really positive way.
yeah. I mean, that's why I started this podcast, right? It's like I had lost my job and I thought, well, what is next? And I thought, well, in the meantime, what can I do to help somebody else? So, yeah, I love that.
And look at what you've created and
And look at what I've
you're
created.
making.
I am so incredibly pleased with the response and the way that this has been embraced, and some things that I can't quite share yet, but I think our audience is going to get larger. And so that's very exciting, and just all out of wanting to help other people share their story. So I just love that. So, for someone who is listening who maybe feels stuck in a season of uncertainty or career transition, what's one piece of advice that you would offer?
Well, I think other than what I just said, don't confuse confidence for confidence, right? I think it really is reconnect with your values.
Mhm.
Make sure that you're going forward in a way that is feeling authentic and right to you, because that'll give you the courage to make the right decisions. And it'll give you the courage, yes, it's a really tough job market. And I know that sometimes it's like we're taking a job because we need the income, we need the job. I'm a realist. I don't deny that
Right.
or pretend that doesn't exist. But ideally, we're going to be going into it saying, all right, I want to find a place where I'm going to make an impact, where I'm valued, and where it aligns with what I believe as a person, because that's when you're going to flourish and be happy. And so I think not letting fear, if you can, and really knowing that yes, you're a participant in this as well. You're a stakeholder. It's your future. So go into it, ask the right questions, have the tough discussions, and make sure that you're doing your due diligence so that you're making a choice ultimately that's going to be the right one for you.
Yeah. I think that's very powerful. So, thinking about kind of your shift in identity from, being in a structured environment when you're working full time, how are you redefining what productivity and success look like for you today?
I think it's interesting because it's kind of become almost a duality for me in a way. Because while I've been, looking for the right place for me, what is my true next home? I've started to do like a lot of people have the fractional consulting work on the side because, like I said earlier, I'm a realist, still have bills to pay, right? So part of my current now is I have these clients, I have responsibilities. And so it does allow me to still bring some structure. I know what I need to do to help these companies, to help them build, help them grow. And so very purposeful in the impact I'm having, the work that needs to be done, and structuring my day in a way where I can balance the different clients, but then also leave time for myself. And there's the block of time where I am building my network and speaking to people and staying part of the conversations so that things don't move on around me without me while I'm stuck in consulting land, right?
Mhm.
And then, like I said, this important part that's this, teaching my Pilates, this new piece of like, I really need to reclaim. And, it's interesting. I think I discovered like, I actually deep down am a more creative person. And so finding that creative outlet. So that's become very important to me. So making sure that I preserve that as well. So, I think it's that special for women, it's that a
Mhm.
how do we carve up our day?
Yes.
And some of it is simple structure and discipline. I'm a paper person. I keep a paper calendar on my desk and I block out time. I know a lot of people love the digital connectivity, but
Mhm.
that's what works for me. Find something that works for you, but be sure that you're channeling all the things that you need to. And then one more thing, like take a few moments of peace sometime to maybe start the day and just sort of, okay, deep breath. What do I need for today? And then what do I need to do today for others, for myself, for my consulting? But staying grounded, it's so important.
It's incredibly important. My neighbor behind me, like that my house backs up to, put in I won't even call it a fountain. There are three different pots that have fountains coming out of them. So it is a water feature. But one thing that I've missed so much about my condo is I used to sit on my deck and listen to the fountain in the pond and listen to that water. And it always was so calming and peaceful for me. And I did not have that here. If I went outside, it was like I heard dogs barking or people's lawnmowers or whatever. And they put that fountain in, and I've spent so much time outside sitting on my deck, just listening to that water and working or not working or what. And it's just been so grounding and calming. And I mean, I want to like make some banana bread and take it over to my neighbor. Like, you have no idea what and it I mean, and it was this took, like, over a week. They did a lot of just landscaping and this water feature. Like, you have no idea what work you paid for and put in has had an impact on me. So, talked before about being in South Africa, being in LA, coming to Cincinnati. You had to rebuild your network from scratch coming to Cincinnati. What was that like?
It was interesting because I moved to Seattle and tried to rebuild a network in Seattle. And then we moved to Cincinnati just a few years later. So part of it was sort of that like Groundhog Day, like, oh, here we go again, right?
Yes.
And initially, I didn't do a lot because it was such a quick, busy transition. I'd taken on this job helping a company redefine their brand purpose, build out a new brand platform, accelerate their digital transformation to take them from being a catalog retailer to a digitally led retailer. So new city, settling into a new house, but just working a lot. And I think it was interesting because my partner, I think he kind of figured out that Ohio and Cincinnati was a really good place before I did. And I was sort of stuck in this, I'm working, I'm proving my impact, I'm making these changes. And then, things changed on the work front. The company that I was working for was part of a larger organization that was undergoing some transformation. And unfortunately, my position was eliminated. And I suddenly found myself in this space of almost like shock. It was like, Ohio, and so that's why I said earlier, I was lucky I had the luxury of taking a few weeks and just sort of taking a deep breath and grounding myself. And I realized that we live in a lovely community. We've got wonderful neighbors. We've made wonderful friends. And so using that as my starting point, I then said, all right, well, if I want to make this sort of my center of gravity, how do I do that? And one of the things that I realized by starting to speak to people is Cincinnati is a very connected place, probably more so than most other places I've lived.
Mhm.
I realized that to fulfill and honor that commitment I made to myself to try and keep this as our home base, I would need to start to meet people. And so it was very proactive and it was on me. And I started by figuring out, there were a lot of job transition groups. So I started there. I kind of took the low hanging fruit. There's lots of different meetings, people meet in person, there's online meetings. So I started showing up online in person and starting to have conversations. And then you start to say, oh, I met you last Thursday and you last week, right? So then you sort of get a sense of not just who the people are who are in flux, but who the people are who are the backbone, who are kind of running this and committed to it. And you get to know them. And then through that, I started to speak to people about, okay, well, what does the marketing landscape look like? What are the companies? Who should I be talking to? And people are very generous for the most part, very kind with their time. And people were very happy to make introductions. And I then started to have conversations. And it's funny because there's this great book they recommend, the 20-minute networking meeting. I've read it and it's really good. It's like how to come in and have these sharp, on point networking meetings. So I sort of just went into it like, let's have connections. But what I realized very quickly, and it's sort of re-echoed in the 20-minute networking meeting, you've got to have a point of view. You need to know who you're speaking to. What is it that you want to talk to them about? And come prepared with good questions.
Yes.
And when you ask good questions and you really listen and you have this, I think you come in with humility and curiosity, wanting to learn and know, and just say, look, this is who I am and this is what I'm trying to do.
Yes.
People respond just, it's overwhelming and beautiful, the kindness. And it honestly surprised me how quickly that kind of networking effect took place. And now I sort of laugh because I will look at someone on LinkedIn and be like, oh, we're connected to 40 people in common. And so
Mhm.
just find a place, start somewhere. And for me, the easiest were these groups that were already getting together. And then you move into that individual one-on-one, and then people tell you should speak to so and so and so and so. And finally you realize you've got a community, and you've had one-on-one real conversations with everybody.
Yeah. So when you're thinking about, so I can say from my perspective, I'm an introvert, textbook introvert. And so I have always been a person that was a volunteer leader because I wanted to have a job at networking events, at, fundraisers, things like that, because I am terrible at small talk because I crave authentic connection. I can't do superficial. I don't want to talk about the weather. There's just something about that for me. And so when you think about that, how are you approaching maintaining those authentic relationships?
Yeah. So I think, just going to your point about being an introvert and shading the conversations,
Yes.
I go back to like the value of good, interesting questions and curiosity.
Mhm.
And I think even like, and this is something I try and do as well, don't just say, so where do you work and what do you do? Find something different, a unique
Mhm.
entry. That really works because I find that people respond, and then you just connect, and they light up and they share. And because you're not saying, so what do you do? Almost like a checklist. Like, are you at a company and a level and a role that's going to be helpful to me? Right. You
Yes.
come in it more like, who are you, the human? I'm curious, and let's have a conversation. And I think when you, for me at least, when you start to have those conversations, you uncover nuggets about people, about things they like, things they do, hobbies, right? And I keep a spreadsheet because I don't have a great memory.
Yeah.
Put those little tidbits in there. And then when you're reaching back out again, and also it sort of jogs your memory. And naturally, I think you remember stuff. And then you're like, I wonder how so and so's, dog is doing. They mentioned
Mhm.
being sick. And then it's a great place to send that note, like, hey, just want to see how your dog's doing. How's your summer going? And then that probably can lead to the, well, are you still looking? I've heard of this some way. So I think it's about curiosity and trying to speak to someone as a human and not a checklist as an entry point into a potential job. I try not even to think about the potential job that this could lead to. This is about getting to know you
Yes.
and really just enjoying my time talking to you. So
Yeah.
I'm really bad at networking sometimes because I will speak to someone for a really long time and they'll be like, oh, shoot, I'm sorry, we're monopolizing it together because we have these deep conversations.
Yeah, you're like, "Oh, yeah, there's other people around us."
Yeah.
I find that as well, though. I go to it's called Coffee for Champions, with my local chamber, and I mean like local, like Springboro Chamber. Um, and I find that I talk to basically one person more in depth every week, but I mean, I'm making around. So I think that if it's a more recurring thing, that sometimes it's okay to have more of that one on one than, kind of that like almost like speed dating aspect to it. So with your background in consumer branding, how has that shaped the way that you think about personal branding and storytelling for individuals?
It's funny. It's sort of like the cobbler's child never wears any shoes. I think as a branding person, I did the worst job branding myself out of the gates. Really, it took a few hard knocks and a few really, like, literally, there's one conversation I remember where I was speaking to this person, and she was pretty much like, everything you're showing me, like, you're a dime a dozen. She's like, what do you really bring that's different? And
Mhm.
to talk about something I was working on, she was like, now that is interesting. So I think my approach is know that when it comes to looking at yourself, it's really hard. It's really hard to see yourself from that 30,000 view because you're in yourself and you know your emotions and your feelings, and to separate it's really hard. So I think the first thing is definitely know what excites you. That you can figure out, right? What excites me, what gets me going, what type of spaces, working spaces excite me, get me going. Do I need that in person? Do I like the flexibility of hybrid? So figure out some of those fundamentals. But then I really think Leaning into a trusted network and people who know you and know you well, preferably people that you've worked with or people that you have relationships with, so they can tell you a little bit more about how you manage situations, your personal dynamics, but then also how you show up and perform and your strengths. There are a lot of tests you can take too, but they don't really know you as people, right? So those are directional. So while I've done, the Hogan assessment and things like that, think some of the biggest value I had was I took my branding. I have a few things. I have an introduction, a branding statement, a resume. We all do. I linked it. Went to people that I really trust, and I said, "Look, does this reflect me as you know me as a person? The skills I have? Am I underrepresenting? Am I overrepresenting?" And I got some great feedback. And so I think just be open to holding up a mirror of self-reflection, not only to yourself, but reflection outward. Because sometimes you get really good input that way. And then, be prepared to maybe hear some things that like, oh, okay, didn't realize that. But yes, now it's an area of growth and opportunity. And then also be prepared to like hear things where it's like, hey, I didn't realize that I really am that good at that. So I think
Right.
that really helps you then to step back and say, okay, now how do I add impact and how do I craft that narrative that when I introduce myself to you, you're going to be like, wow, I want to know more.
Yes. Yes. So we talked a little bit about this before about having courage and making brave career decisions.
Yeah.
You've turned down some opportunities that just didn't align, even when maybe the financial offer was tempting. What gave you that clarity and courage to say no?
The biggest thing was knowing myself. So I think knowing myself is a product of experience, right? I've been doing this for a while. And I said earlier, I worked in a lot of different types of companies. I worked under a lot of different management structures. I've worked in really positive places, really toxic places. So, and I say this to the young people on my team as well. I'm like, this is like a learning as you go. So, what are the things I like, but equally important, what are the things I don't like? And you need to know both of those things so that when you're going out and you're evaluating your opportunity, you can be asking the questions to try and uncover, are there the red flags? And again, some of it comes with experience. Some of it comes with knowing yourself. And then I also believe just being true to like you have that little voice that is saying, this is, you've been through something like this before, or these are the watch outs. And then the third piece, and I realized this was there was one role in particular, a very appealing role, but it was in an industry I'd worked in before and I had a lot of contacts in the industry. And I went to some of the people I trusted most and I asked them about the company. And based on what they told me, I decided not to take the role. And you know what? 3 months later, there was a change in the whole structure of the company. The entire leadership team was let go, including the person who I would have been reporting into. So I would have moved across the country, and 3 months later, been sitting in a place where there was massive upheaval and disruptions. Sometimes that industry intel can help and it can validate what you might already know in terms of, I know who I am, the kind of place I want to work at, and the type of people I want to work with. So don't let fear be your guide. It's hard, but try not to let that happen.
I'm trying to teach that lesson to my children. My daughter lives with me full time, and I remember I had an opportunity I was pretty excited about. It was going to be kind of an interim, like a fractional role. And I told her, I said, I'm praying about this next meeting that's coming up or this interview that was coming up. I'd had some calls already with the outside firm that had reached out to me. Wonderful calls. And then what was coming up next was to meet with the actual client. And as I'm in that meeting, it's becoming abundantly clear they don't have defined what good looks like and what success would look like. And I thought, if I take this role, I am not going to be successful because they can't even define success, right? And so, how's that going to impact my mental health, my reputation, all of those things? And so, before the call even ended, like I had kind of already made the decision in my head, like, this isn't the right thing for me. And I'm thinking of how I'm going to explain, have that conversation with the firm that reached out. And I was talking to my daughter about it later and I said, I want to clarify something. But when I said, I'm praying for this opportunity, I said, it's not like a genie in a bottle and like I'm praying that I get it, right? Like it's not like, oh, fingers crossed. It was, I'm praying that I have the courage and the discernment in the moment to ask the right I mean, because I could have danced around it and not asked the questions, right? But based on the questions that I asked, it became abundantly clear that this was not the right it wasn't even the right next step for the organization, let alone to be bringing me into it or anybody else. And had I not done that and gotten involved in it, I mean, yes, the money would have been great, but also I think it comes down to that best yes, and all your no's make room for that best yes. And what would I not be able to do because I had made that decision out of fear, out of that scarcity mindset? And so I love that you're thinking that way for yourself, and I know that it's difficult to do that. And so I give you so much kudos and respect for that, because it's definitely not easy, but I think that it's like my friend Lori Rudiman wrote the book Betting on You. When you bet on you, when you bet on yourself, I mean, that's when you're truly going to realize that success.
I just love two things that you said though in there, because I think there's one thing you sort of added another dimension to courage. Because I was thinking about it, when we talked about it from the courage of knowing yourself and knowing it's not the right fit and the courage to say no. But I
Yes.
think there's a different kind of courage that you mentioned that comes before that, even. And it's the courage to ask the hard questions so that you know if it's the right fit. And then the other thing that I love that you talked about was like room for the right yes. Creating that room, that scarcity mindset, and it really is. It's like, clean it out so I have that space and the capacity. Those were just beautiful things that you brought to this conversation. I love it.
Well, thank you. When you think about staying agile as a human, I know we talked about this before, both in work and in life. What does that mean to you?
I think about it holistically on every level. It's physical, mental, and kind of emotional or resilience
Mhm.
based. So physical agility, staying healthy, eating well, little things. I think when I teach my micro fitness classes, I like to always do balance work and
Mhm.
mobility. And it's funny because the people in my classes now love it because they realize how important the little things are, those foundations. Keeping a sense of balance. If you can't balance, you can't walk and you're going to fall. And if you fall as you get older, you're going to be bedbound. So sometimes it's the small things that matter. And agility doesn't mean that you have to scale a 10-foot wall. Agility means that you can balance on one leg so that if you trip and fall, you're not going to smack into the pavement. So that's physical. I think in the mental space, it's about curiosity, endless
Mhm.
curiosity, just being open to exploring and learning and not trying not to we all get stuck in our routines. It gets comfortable, right? We have things we love, but being open to new things. And, it's funny, just a quick story, because I think a great example of this is my mom. She's 83. And when ChatGPT first became a thing, I took an engineering course. And one night we came home and we had no idea what we were going to make for dinner. So I was like, you know what? I've got this fresh prompt engineering knowledge. I'm going to use ChatGPT. This was like a few years ago, but it just come on the scene to figure out dinner. So I kind of made a little list of some of the key ingredients, and it spat out like 5 different ideas. They were all great. And then it gave me the recipes. And so I was telling my mom about this, and she's like, I need to do this. And she, lo and behold, had my brother put ChatGPT on her phone for her. She lives in Johannesburg.
Mhm.
And she has become this chat GPT. Like, she uses it for meal planning. She goes to chat GPT all the time to ask it questions, how
I
to
love
do
it.
things. Oh yeah. So the other day she got an order from Temu and she needed to do a return and she couldn't figure out how to do a return. So she had chat GPT tell her how to do the return in the Temu app. And she's 83. So she's sort of my inspiration for stay curious, stay open. That
Yes.
to me is true sort of agility, and then emotional agility. That's really, and I think it comes back to the quiet moments you have on your deck with the water fountain meditation.
Mhm.
Just finding peace with yourself so that you stay connected. And we change as humans.
Yeah.
Of course we do. We grow, we age, right? So being able to stay connected and stay connected to who you are and who you're becoming. And so that way you know what you like, where you're going. And I think that's really important too. A 3-legged stool of agility, if you will.
I love that. I love that. If you could speak to a prospective employer, prospective team, what would you say? What are you looking for? How can we help?
Well, I think when I look over the last few years, my story is really one about a transformational leader, right? So I've been in either existing larger companies and helped them transform who they are as a brand, how they're approaching their core business proposition, and then building out the people and the infrastructure and the teams to support that, or helping them go on that digital transformation journeys. And in the retail, a lot of sort of more legacy, like still relying heavily on catalog. Not saying that they would step away from catalog, but how do they diversify and then meet people where they are nowadays on their phones in the digital world, and really look at that sort of multi-channel ecosystem. So first and foremost, I'd say it is a transformational leader. And then tying into that, my experience running digital marketing teams, brand marketing teams, creative teams. So I can straddle the disciplines and really work with the teams to bridge from strategy, connecting the dots to flawless execution. And then I think my curiosity also helps put me in a place of, I'm always looking at what's happening in the world and how it's impacting us and our business, and what should we be doing to be thinking about our business in a more infinite way and doing the right things for our people and the business to make sure that we can keep going and keep the business beyond even the generation that's in it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with you. I believe that 100%. If people want to connect with you, where's the best place?
LinkedIn is a great place for people to find me, Natalie Brown on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And I would love to meet some new people, have some great conversations, and just get to know you and learn more about what you're looking for and how I can help as well.
Love that. So, people, when you connect with Natalie, please put a note in there about where you heard about her. Stranger danger is real, and people spam, and it's a whole mess out there. So, let's take care of, be more respectful and take better care of each other in that regard.
Thank you for that call out, Nicole, because that's really,
Yes.
and I tend, if there's no note and it's just a random person, I tend not to accept those LinkedIn requests because connection has a reason, right?
Connection
So we
does
need a
have a reason.
basis for the connection.
That's right. That's right. Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your story and your insights. I know that this conversation is going to inspire a lot of people. So I appreciate your time so much today with me.
Thank you so much. I've had such a great time getting to know you and chatting with you. And I really appreciate you having me on to talk a little bit about my journey. So thank you, Nicole.
Of course. And thank you to our listener for joining me as we amplify voices, elevate stories, and support one another one episode at a time.
Pages blank, but hearts alive. Through their journeys, they still strive. Tales of passion, grit, and grace. Every journey leaves its trace.